Admiral Kim Dae stood on the bridge of the Terran Defense Station, watching the stars through the massive viewing screen. Earth floated below him, blue and green and beautiful. Most aliens who saw Earth thought it looked peaceful. They were wrong. Earth was a killer. Kim Dae knew this better than anyone. He had grown up in the mountains of Korea, where winter temperatures could freeze blood in your veins. He had trained in jungles where everything from tiny insects to massive predators wanted to eat you alive. He had survived storms that could tear apart buildings and earthquakes that could swallow entire cities. That was just Tuesday on Earth. The communication console beeped. Lieutenant Han Minho looked up from his station, his young face serious. "Admiral, we have an incoming transmission. It's from outside our solar system." "Put it through," Kim Dae said. He had been expecting this call, though he hoped it would never come. The screen flickered and two alien faces appeared. One looked like it was made of living crystal, with sharp edges that caught the light. The other had green skin that seemed to drip with some kind of acid. Both looked like they had crawled out of humanity's worst nightmares. "Admiral Kim Dae of Earth," the crystal being said. Its voice sounded like wind through broken glass. "I am General Thekfor of Korax Prime. This is Commander Zixala of Venom's Edge. We need to talk." Kim Dae nodded. He had heard of these two worlds. Korax Prime was a planet where crystal storms could cut through starship armor like paper. Venom's Edge was covered in poisonous swamps where the very air could melt your lungs. Like Earth, they were what the galaxy called Deathworlds, planets so dangerous that most species would die just by landing on them. "What do you want to discuss?" Kim Dae asked. "War," Commander Zixala said. Her voice bubbled like acid eating through metal. "The Celestial Dominion is coming for all of us." Kim Dae felt his stomach drop. The Celestial Dominion was the largest empire in the galaxy. They controlled thousands of star systems and had fleets that could destroy entire planets. For 300 years they had been growing stronger, conquering every world they found. "Why would they want our worlds?" Kim Dae asked. "Everyone knows Deathworlds are useless. That's why they leave us alone." General Thekfor's crystal face shifted, showing what might have been anger. "Not anymore. Their new emperor thinks differently. He believes that species from Deathworlds are too dangerous to live. He calls us evolutionary mistakes that need to be corrected." "Corrected how?" Lieutenant Han Minho asked from his station. "Complete extermination," Commander Zixala said. "We have intelligence reports. The Dominion is building a new fleet. They call it the Grand Fleet. 10,000 ships all designed for one purpose, destroying Deathworlds and everyone on them." Kim Dae closed his eyes for a moment. Earth had always known this day might come. Humans had spread to other star systems, but Earth remained their home. It was where they had learned to fight, to survive, to never give up no matter how bad things got. If the Dominion wanted to destroy Earth, they would have to go through every human alive. "What are you proposing?" Kim Dae asked. "An alliance," General Thekfor said. 3 Deathworlds working together. We know the Dominion expects us to fight alone. They think we're too different to cooperate." "They're wrong. Very wrong," Commander Zixala added. "We may look different, but we all know the same truth. We know what it means to live on a world that tries to kill you every single day. We know how to survive when survival should be impossible." Kim Dae thought about this. Humans had never worked closely with other Deathworld species before. Earth's military was good, but they were small compared to the Dominion. The 3 Deathworlds combined might have a chance, but it would still be a tiny chance. "Admiral," Han Minho said quietly, "long-range sensors are detecting movement in the outer systems. Multiple ships moving toward the core worlds. Dominion scout fleets," General Thekfor said. "They're already starting. My people estimate we have 6 months before the Grand Fleet arrives." "Maybe less," Kim Dae made his decision. "Where do you want to meet?" "Haven's Rest Station in neutral space," Commander Zixala said. "It's the only place large enough for all 3 of our species to work together safely." "I'll send Captain Park Hana," Kim Dae said. "She's our best diplomat and one of our finest warriors. If anyone can make this alliance work, she can." "Good," General Thekfor said. "We leave for Haven's Rest in 3 days. Time is running out for all of us." The transmission ended, leaving Kim Dae alone with his thoughts. He looked down at Earth again, at the planet that had made humanity what they were. Every mountain, every ocean, every desert had been a teacher. Every storm, every earthquake, every predator had been a test. Now humanity faced their final exam. "Minho," he said, turning to his young officer. Send a message to all Earth Defense Forces. Tell them to prepare for war, and send word to Captain Park Hana. She has a very important mission." "Yes, sir," Han Minho said. "Sir, do you think we can win?" Kim Dae smiled grimly. "Son, humans have been fighting impossible odds since we first crawled out of the caves. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have wiped us out a dozen times over. We're still here because we're too stubborn to die." He paused, looking at the stars where somewhere the largest fleet in galactic history was preparing to destroy everything he loved. "Besides," he added, "they've never fought a Deathworld before. They have no idea what they're getting into." 3 days later, Captain Park Hana's ship left Earth's orbit, heading for Haven's rest station. She carried with her the hopes of humanity and the beginning of the strangest alliance the galaxy had ever seen. The Dominion thought they were hunting 3 weak, isolated worlds. Instead, they were about to face something they had never encountered. 3 species who had learned that the secret to survival wasn't being the strongest or the smartest. It was refusing to give up, no matter what. Captain Park Hana had seen many strange things in her life, but Haven's rest station was something new. The massive space station floated in the darkness between star systems, built by traders who needed a place where any species could meet safely. Different sections had different atmospheres, different gravity, even different types of radiation. She walked through the main corridor wearing her dress uniform, but she also carried her sidearm. Old habits from growing up on Earth. The corridor was filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Most of them stopped to stare at her. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy, and it wasn't for being friendly. The meeting room was in the station's center, where all 3 environmental systems overlapped. Park Hana entered and saw her future allies for the first time in person. General Thekvor was even more impressive than she had expected. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body made of what looked like living crystal. Light moved through him in patterns that hurt to watch directly. When he moved, she could hear a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Commander Zixala was smaller but somehow more frightening. Her green skin constantly dripped with some kind of acid that ate small holes in the metal floor where she stood. Her eyes were bright yellow and never seemed to blink. When she breathed, small clouds of poisonous gas escaped from vents along her neck. "Captain Park Hana," General Thekvor said. His voice echoed strangely in the room. "We have heard much about Earth's warriors. They say you fight like your world itself, beautiful but deadly." "We fight to survive," Park Hana said simply, "just like you do." Commander Zixala made a sound that might have been laughter. "Survival? Yes, we understand this word. On Venom's edge, children learn to breathe poison before they can walk. On Korax Prime, they learn to hide from crystal storms that can cut through armor. What do Earth children learn? Everything wants to kill you," Park Hana said. "And that's okay because you're harder to kill than it thinks." The 3 of them spent the next several hours sharing information. The news was worse than any of them had hoped. The Celestial Dominion wasn't just building one fleet. They were building the largest military force in galactic history. 10,000 ships, General Thekvor said, projecting holographic images from his crystal body, each one larger than anything our worlds have ever built. Their flagship alone has more firepower than our entire combined fleets. They have energy weapons that can crack planets, Commander Zixala added. Shields that have never been breached. And something new, weapons that feed on life energy itself. Park Hana studied the images. The Dominion ships looked like floating cities, massive and powerful and perfect. Everything about them screamed order, control, overwhelming force. They were designed to make enemies surrender just by looking at them. "Good," she said. Both aliens turned to stare at her. "Good?" General Thekvor asked. "They're thinking like an empire," Park Hana explained. "Big ships, perfect formations, overwhelming firepower. They want to fight a proper war with proper rules. But we're not proper. We're Deathworlders." She stood up and began pacing, the way she always did when she was planning something dangerous. "They expect us to meet them in space, fleet against fleet, and lose honorably. They expect us to fight like civilized species, but civilized species don't come from worlds that try to kill them every day." Commander Zixala's yellow eyes brightened with understanding. "You want to fight dirty? I want to fight smart," Park Hana corrected. "On Earth, we have a saying, if you find yourself in a fair fight, you didn't plan properly." Over the next few days, the 3 Deathworld representatives worked out the basics of their alliance. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Coraxians could use their crystal technology to create false sensor readings, making one ship look like 10 ships or making 10 ships disappear completely. The Venomites had biotechnology that could turn the Dominion's own life support systems against them. Earth brought something else entirely: psychological warfare, Park Hana explained to her new allies. Humans don't just fight to win. We fight to break our enemy's will to fight. We make them afraid. We make them doubt. We make them make mistakes. The first test came sooner than expected. Lieutenant Han Minho's prediction had been right. Dominion scout fleets were already moving toward the Deathworlds. 3 small fleets, each containing about 50 ships. To most species, 50 Dominion warships would be an unstoppable force. Commander Li Jiwan commanded Earth's contribution to the first battle. Her ship was the Soul's Vengeance, a small frigate that looked like a toy next to the massive Dominion destroyers. But Park Hana had chosen Li Jiwan for a reason. She was the kind of pilot who could thread a needle while the needle was trying to kill her. The battle took place in an asteroid field near the outer edge of the Korax system. The Dominion fleet came in perfect formation, their shields glowing with power, their weapons charging for a clean, efficient victory. They got something very different. The Coraxians activated their Ghost Fleet technology. Suddenly, the 50 Dominion ships found themselves facing what looked like 500 enemy vessels. The Venomites released clouds of bioweapons that slipped through the Dominion shields like they weren't there, and Earth's ships did something that no civilized species would ever do. They attacked like they were insane. Li Jiwan's frigate dove straight at a Dominion destroyer that was 20 times larger. At the last second, she spun her ship sideways and fired every weapon she had into the destroyer's communications array. Then she flew directly under the massive ship, so close that her hull scraped against its shields. The destroyer tried to return fire, but its weapons couldn't turn far enough to hit something so close. Meanwhile, Li Jiwan's gunners were shooting at anything that looked important. They hit sensor arrays, weapon mounts, engine exhausts. None of the damage was fatal, but it was maddening. Other Earth ships were doing the same thing throughout the battle. They flew like pilots who didn't care if they lived or died, taking risks that made no tactical sense. They rammed enemy ships with their reinforced hulls. They used their own ships as missiles. They did things that no computer could predict because no sane species would try them. The Dominion admiral commanding the scout fleet sent increasingly confused reports back to his headquarters. The Deathworlders are not fighting according to any known tactical doctrine. They appear to be using their ships as weapons rather than weapon platforms. Several of my captains are requesting permission to withdraw. But the most effective weapon wasn't the ships or the technology. It was fear. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had always fought civilized enemies who followed civilized rules. They had never faced an enemy that would fly a damaged ship directly into their flagship's bridge just to make a point. When the battle was over, the Dominion scout fleet was in full retreat. They had lost 12 ships to an enemy force 1/10 their size. More importantly, they had lost something much more valuable: their confidence. Admiral Luxus, commanding the Dominion's advance forces, sent an urgent message to his emperor. The Deathworld species are more dangerous than anticipated. They do not fight like any enemy we have previously encountered. Request permission to bring additional forces. Emperor Valdris, sitting on his throne aboard the massive flagship Eternal Supremacy, read the report with growing anger. 3 primitive worlds were making his forces look like fools. This would not continue. Send the message to all fleet commanders, he ordered. The Grand Fleet moves immediately. We will not be humiliated by these evolutionary mistakes. Meanwhile, at Haven's rest station, Park Hana received the battle reports with grim satisfaction. They had won the first round, but she knew it was only the beginning. How long until the Grand Fleet arrives? She asked General Thekvor. His crystal body flickered with calculations. 4 months, perhaps less if they push their engines? Then we'd better get ready, Park Hana said. Because when they get here, they're going to be very, very angry. General Yang Sunwoo stood in the command center of the Nexus system, watching the tactical display with growing concern. The past 3 months had brought victory after victory for the Deathworld Alliance, but each win came at a price they could barely afford to pay. The Nexus system was the gateway to all 3 Deathworlds. It contained the only stable hyperspace routes that led to Earth, Korax Prime, and Venom's Edge. If the Dominion took this system, they could attack all 3 planets at once. If the Alliance lost it, they would be fighting 3 separate wars instead of 1. Status report, Yang Sunwoo said to his mixed crew of humans. Coraxians and Venomites. Captain Cho Yuna looked up from her station aboard the Busan Defiant. Her ship was one of Earth's finest destroyers, but it looked tiny next to the Coraxian vessel Harmony of Storms. The crystal ship was beautiful and deadly, its entire hull made of living crystal that could repair itself and adapt to different kinds of damage. Even stranger was the Venomite bioship Acid Rain. It looked more like a living creature than a spacecraft, with organic curves and surfaces that constantly shifted and changed. Sometimes Yang Sunwoo thought he could see it breathing. Long-range sensors showed Dominion forces massing at the edge of the system. Cho Yuna reported. Looks like they're planning a major assault. How major? Yang Sunwoo asked. 800 ships, came the reply from the Coraxian commander. More than we have faced in any single battle. Yang Sunwoo nodded grimly. The Alliance had maybe 200 ships in the entire system, and many of those were damaged from previous fights. They were outnumbered 4-1 by an enemy with superior technology and firepower. Any word from our scouts? He asked. Commander Zixala's voice crackled over the communication system from the Acid Rain. Sergeant Kang Mira's boarding team successfully infiltrated a Dominion supply ship. They brought back intelligence data. Yang Sunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. Sergeant Kang Mira was one of Earth's best Marines, trained to fight in the worst possible conditions. If she looked worried when she delivered her report, that meant the news was very bad indeed. Kang Mira appeared on the main screen, still wearing her combat armor. Behind her, Yang Sunwoo could see Coraxian crystal warriors and Venomite biosoldiers. It still amazed him how well the three species worked together, despite being so different that they could barely breathe the same air. Sir, Kang Mira said, we found something in the Dominion data cores. They're not just trying to conquer our worlds. They're collecting genetic samples from every species they encounter. For what purpose? Yang Sunwoo asked. Something called Project Ascension, Kang Mira replied. The data is incomplete, but it looks like they're trying to combine genetic material from different species to create something new. Dr. Yoon Ji-hyun stepped into view behind Kang Mira. The xenobiologist looked pale and shaken. General, I've been studying the captured Dominion weapons. They're not just energy weapons. They're powered by life force itself. Yang Sunwoo felt his blood turn cold. Explain. Every shot they fire draws energy from organic matter, Dr. Yoon Ji-hyun said. The more living beings in the area, the more powerful their weapons become. That's why they've been so effective against populated worlds. They're literally feeding on the life energy of their victims. The implications hit Yang Sunwoo like a physical blow. The Dominion wasn't just conquering the galaxy. They were harvesting it. Every species they defeated became fuel for their weapons, food for their empire. There's more, Dr. Yoon Ji-hyun continued. The genetic samples they're collecting aren't random. They're specifically targeting species with unique survival traits. They want DNA from Deathworlders. Why? Captain Cho Yuna asked. Because we're the hardest to kill, Yang Sunwoo said quietly. They want to learn how to make themselves as tough as we are. The battle for the Nexus system began 6 hours later. The Dominion fleet came in 3 waves, each one larger than the last. Their ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charging with stolen life energy, their shields glowing with power that could stop anything the Alliance threw at them. The first wave hit the outer defense platforms like a hammer. Earth's orbital fortresses, built to withstand anything from asteroid impacts to nuclear weapons, were vaporized in seconds. The Coraxian crystal arrays, designed to focus and redirect energy attacks, shattered under the overwhelming firepower. Yang Sunwoo watched his defenses collapse and made the hardest decision of his military career. All ships, fall back to the inner system, he ordered. Abandon the outer defenses, sir? Captain Cho Yuna asked in shock. We're just going to let them through? We're going to make them pay for every kilometer, Yang Sunwoo replied. This isn't about holding ground anymore. It's about making sure they bleed for every inch they take. The retreat was a masterpiece of coordinated desperation. Earth ships provided covering fire while Coraxian vessels used their crystal technology to create false sensor readings. Venomite bioships released clouds of organisms that ate through Dominion hull plating, but the cost was terrible. The Alliance lost 50 ships in the first day of fighting. Corax Prime's largest orbital city took a direct hit from a Dominion planet cracker weapon. The crystal metropolis that had stood for 1,000 years was gone in an instant, taking 2 million Coraxians with it. Venom's Edge suffered even worse. Dominion bombardment ships dropped toxic bombs that made vast regions of the planet uninhabitable, even by Venomite standards. The acid seas that had been their home for millions of years began to boil as the planet's core was destabilized. Earth watched as the Luna defense grid, the ring of weapons, platforms that had protected humanity's homeworld for 3 centuries, was systematically destroyed. Cities that had survived everything from nuclear war to alien invasion were burning under kinetic bombardment. In Seoul's underground bunkers, Dr. Lim Yoonji coordinated civilian evacuation efforts. She had been a teacher before the war, but now she was helping organize the greatest exodus in human history. Millions of people were fleeing to the deepest shelters, the underground cities built in the mountains where humanity had learned to hide from ice ages and worse. "How much time do we have?" she asked the military liaison. "Maybe a week before they reach Earth's orbit," came the reply. "Maybe less." Dr. Lim Yoonji looked at the children around her, kids who should have been in school instead of huddling in bomb shelters. They looked scared but determined. Even the youngest ones understood that this might be humanity's last stand. "Then we'd better make it count," she said. Back in space, Yang Sunwoo gathered his remaining commanders for what might be their final strategy meeting. The Alliance was down to less than 100 ships. The Dominion still had over 500, and their grand fleet was still days away. "We can't win a straight fight," he said bluntly, "but we don't have to. We just have to survive long enough for Captain Park Hana's mission to succeed." "What mission?" Captain Cho Yuna asked. Yang Sunwoo smiled grimly. "The one that's going to turn this entire war upside down. Park Hana and her team are carrying intelligence that will prove the Dominion Emperor isn't what he claims to be." "What do you mean?" Commander Zixala asked. "I mean Emperor Valdris has been lying to his own people for generations," Yang Sunwoo said. "And when they find out the truth, this grand fleet might just turn on itself." He looked out at the stars where somewhere in the darkness, the largest military force in galactic history was approaching. "All we have to do is stay alive long enough to deliver the message." Fleet Admiral Kim Nam-joon had seen many impossible things in his life, but the Dominion Grand Fleet was something beyond imagination. When it emerged from hyperspace, it was like watching a second galaxy appear in the sky. 10,000 ships. The smallest one was larger than Earth's biggest dreadnought. The largest ones were the size of moons, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They moved in perfect formation, a wall of metal and energy that stretched across half the solar system. At the center of this massive fleet was the Eternal Supremacy, Emperor Valdris's flagship. It was less a ship than a flying world, complete with its own captured moon that served as a weapons platform. The Emperor's personal vessel was so large that it had its own weather systems, its own gravity, its own cities full of conquered peoples who served as living batteries for the ship's life-energy weapons. "Admiral," Captain Bae Suji said from her position at the communication station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Emperor himself." Kim Nam-joon nodded. He had been expecting this. "Put it through." The main screen filled with the image of Emperor Valdris. He was tall and elegant with perfect features and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. Everything about him spoke of divine power and absolute authority. He looked like exactly what he claimed to be, a god among mortals. "Creatures of the Deathworlds," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You have fought well, but your struggle is meaningless. I offer you one final chance. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift. Continue to resist and I will make your worlds burn for 1,000 years." Kim Nam-joon looked around his bridge at the mixed crew of humans, Coraxians, and Venomites. They were exhausted, wounded, running on determination alone. His fleet consisted of maybe 300 ships, most of them damaged. Against 10,000 fresh enemy vessels, they had no chance at all. "Send our reply," he said. Captain Bae Suji activated the transmitter. Kim Nam-joon looked directly into the camera, knowing that his words would be heard throughout the Dominion fleet. "Emperor Valdris," he said calmly, "we are the children of worlds that tried to kill us every day of our lives. We learned to survive when survival should have been impossible. We learned to fight when fighting should have been hopeless. And we learned something else." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We learned that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose." The transmission ended. For a moment, there was silence across both fleets. Then the Dominion opened fire. The first barrage was like watching stars explode. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids lashed out across space. Missiles that could destroy cities streaked toward the Alliance fleet. The life energy weapons drew power from every living being in the area, making each shot stronger than the last. Kim Namjoon's flagship, the Incheon's Pride, shook as near misses overloaded its shields. Around him, Alliance ships began to die. The beautiful Caraxian crystal vessel Song of Stars shattered into a million glittering pieces. The Venomite bioship Living Thunder simply melted as acid weapons ate through its organic hull. All ships scatter formation, Kim Namjoon ordered. Don't try to fight them ship to ship. Make them chase us. The Alliance fleet broke apart like a school of fish attacked by sharks. Individual ships and small groups began darting between the massive Dominion vessels, too small and fast to target effectively. They couldn't hurt the enemy's big ships, but they could confuse them, frustrate them, make them angry. Meanwhile, Captain Bae Suji prepared for the most important mission in galactic history. Her ship, the Incheon's Last Stand, was one of Earth's newest stealth frigates. It was designed to slip past enemy sensors and deliver special forces teams behind enemy lines. Today, it would carry something more valuable than soldiers. Captain, Dr. Yoon Ji-hyun said as she handed Bae Suji a small data storage device. This contains everything we learned about Emperor Valdris. Genetic analysis, medical records, the truth about what he really is. Bae Suji took the device carefully. It looked so small and innocent, but it contained information that could destroy an empire. The plan is simple, Kim Namjoon explained. Get close enough to the Eternal Supremacy to broadcast this data on all frequencies. Once the Dominion fleet learns the truth about their emperor, they'll turn on him. And if I can't get close enough? Bae Suji asked. Then we're all dead anyway, Kim Namjoon said honestly. So you'd better get close enough. The Incheon's Last Stand slipped away from the main battle, using its stealth systems to avoid the massive Dominion ships. Bae Suji flew her ship like a ghost, sliding between energy beams and missile barrages heading for the heart of the enemy fleet. Behind her, the battle for the solar system raged on. Alliance ships threw themselves at the enemy with desperate courage, knowing that every second they bought might be the difference between victory and extinction. Captain Cho Yuna's Busan Defiant led a suicidal charge against a Dominion dreadnought, drawing fire away from a damaged Caraxian vessel. Her ship was torn apart by enemy weapons, but not before her crew managed to plant explosives in the dreadnought's engine room. Major Shin Woo-jin coordinated the defense of Earth itself as Dominion landing craft began to pierce the atmosphere. The Emperor had decided to take Earth personally, leading a ground invasion from his personal shuttle. He wanted to walk on the Deathworld that had defied him, to prove that even the most dangerous planet in the galaxy could not stop a god. What Emperor Valdris didn't understand was that landing on Earth wasn't conquering it. It was stepping into the arena with every human who had ever lived there. The mountains of Korea remembered every soldier who had trained in their snow-covered peaks. The forest recalled every guerrilla fighter who had hidden among their trees. The cities themselves seemed to rise up against the invaders, as if the very buildings were on humanity's side. In the ruins of the old demilitarized zone, Shin Woo-jin's forces fought with weapons that had been perfected over centuries of human conflict. They used the terrain like a weapon, turning every hill and valley into a trap. They fought like soldiers who knew that retreat meant the death of everything they loved. But the real battle was happening in space, where Bae Suji's tiny ship was approaching the massive bulk of the Eternal Supremacy. The Emperor's flagship was so large that it had its own defensive fleet, hundreds of smaller ships protecting it like antibodies defending a body. Bae Suji flew her ship through the defensive screen with skill that bordered on the impossible. She used sensor shadows created by the larger ships, slipping through gaps in their formation that lasted only seconds. Enemy fighters chased her, but she knew something they didn't. She had been trained to fly on Earth, where the sky itself tried to kill you with storms that could tear apart aircraft. A few fighters with energy weapons were nothing compared to flying through a typhoon. Finally, she was close enough. The Eternal Supremacy filled her entire view screen, a metal world bristling with weapons and shields. At this range, she could see the Emperor's personal shuttle docked at the flagship's command section. "This is Captain Bae Suji to all Alliance forces," she broadcast, beginning final transmission in 10 seconds. She activated the data burst, sending Dr. Yoon Ji-hyun's intelligence across all communication frequencies. The information spread through the Dominion fleet like wildfire, reaching every ship, every crew member, every officer who had served the Emperor with blind loyalty for their entire lives. And for the first time in generations, they learned the truth about their god Emperor. Emperor Valdris was not the pure-blooded divine ruler he claimed to be. He was a parasite, a creature that had been replacing its failing organs with parts stolen from conquered species for over 1,000 years. His perfect appearance was a lie maintained by technology and the life force of his victims. Every genetic sample the Dominion had collected, every species they had harvested, every world they had drained, it had all been to feed their emperor's hunger for immortality. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Across the Grand Fleet, ship after ship began turning their weapons on their neighbors. Admiral Luxus, who had served the Emperor faithfully for decades, found himself leading a massive rebellion as the truth sank in. "All ships," he broadcast across the fleet, "we have been serving a monster. Our Emperor is not divine. He is an abomination that has been feeding on us for centuries." The Grand Fleet tore itself apart as 10,000 ships chose sides. Some remained loyal to their Emperor, but many more joined the rebellion. The largest space battle in galactic history became a civil war in the span of minutes. Emperor Valdris, watching his empire collapse around him, made a final decision. If he could not rule the galaxy, he would destroy the world that had defied him. The Eternal Supremacy turned its most powerful weapons toward Earth, preparing to crack the planet like an egg. But Earth's children were not finished fighting yet. Commander Li Jiwan stood on the bridge of Earth's last orbital defense station, watching the Eternal Supremacy turn its planet-cracking weapons toward her homeworld. The Emperor's flagship was so massive that it blocked out the stars, a metal mountain hanging in space above the blue marble that had given birth to humanity. "All stations report ready," her tactical officer said. The defense station was ancient by military standards, built back when humans still thought they might face alien invasion. Now it was the only thing standing between Earth and annihilation. "Emperor Valdris wants to make this personal," Li Jiwan said to her crew. "He's coming down to Earth himself to finish this fight face to face." Through the station's sensors, she could see the Emperor's personal shuttle leaving the Eternal Supremacy. It was escorted by 100 smaller craft, all heading for Earth's surface. Behind them, the massive flagship's weapons began to charge with stolen life energy. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're getting reports from the surface. Major Shin Wujin says they're ready for him." Li Jiwan smiled grimly. Earth had been preparing for this moment since the war began. Every mountain, every forest, every city had been turned into a trap. If Emperor Valdris wanted to walk on the Deathworld that had defied him, he would learn what it really meant to fight on humanity's home ground. The Emperor's shuttle landed in the ruins of Seoul, where the ancient city had been rebuilt a dozen times after wars, disasters, and alien attacks. Valdris stepped out wearing armor that gleamed like captured starlight, carrying weapons powered by the life force of 1,000 conquered worlds. He looked exactly like what he claimed to be, a god walking among mortals. His perfect features showed no doubt, no fear, only the absolute certainty of divine right. Around him, his elite guards formed a protective circle, their armor and weapons representing the finest technology the Dominion could create. What they found waiting for them was not an army or a fortress. It was the city itself. Major Shin Wujin had spent months preparing Seoul for this moment. Every building had been rigged with explosives. Every street had hidden sniper positions. Every sewer tunnel and subway line had been turned into a route for guerrilla fighters. But more than that, he had turned the city into a living memorial to human stubbornness. Every wall was covered with messages from people who had lived and died defending their world. Every street corner held reminders of the thousands of years humans had spent learning to survive the impossible. "Welcome to Earth," Shin Wujin's voice echoed across the city from hidden speakers. "Population, everyone who ever refused to give up." The Emperor's forces began their advance, expecting organized resistance they could crush with superior firepower. Instead, they found something much more dangerous, a city that fought back like a living thing. Sniper fire came from windows that should have been empty. Explosions erupted from manholes and storm drains. The very ground seemed to shift under their feet as hidden tunnels collapsed, separating the Emperor's forces into smaller groups that could be picked off one by one. Emperor Valdris himself pushed forward toward the city center, his perfect composure beginning to crack. This was not how divine conquest was supposed to work. Gods did not have to hunt guerrilla fighters through the rubble of broken cities. Meanwhile, in space, Li Jiwan made her own final gambit. The defense station's weapons were nowhere near powerful enough to hurt the eternal supremacy, but she didn't need to destroy it. She just needed to get close enough to board it. "All hands prepare for ramming speed," she announced over the station's intercom. "We're going to introduce that tin can to some Earth-style hospitality." The defense station was essentially a small asteroid that had been hollowed out and filled with weapons and shields. It had been built to stay in one place and defend Earth's orbital space. It was definitely not designed to be used as a missile. Li Jiwan didn't care about design specifications. The station's engines, never meant for more than minor orbital adjustments, roared to life at maximum power. The massive structure began to move slowly at first, then faster and faster as it built momentum toward the enemy flagship. The Eternal Supremacy's defensive guns opened fire, energy beams that could vaporize mountains striking the charging station. But the asteroid's rock and metal had been forged in the fire of stellar creation, and it was tougher than the Emperor's weapons had expected. Li Jiwan held on as her station shook itself apart around her, atmosphere streaming out through cracks. In the hull, gravity generators failing as power systems overloaded. Half her crew was already dead from the enemy fire, but the survivors kept working their stations with the calm professionalism of people who had always known this day would come. The station hit the Eternal Supremacy's shields like a hammer striking glass. The enormous flagship shuddered as energies that could stop planet-killer weapons were overwhelmed by simple kinetic force, applied with Earth-born determination. For a moment, the shields held. Then they collapsed, and Li Jiwan's station smashed into the Emperor's flagship with the force of a small moon. The impact tore a hole in the Eternal Supremacy's hull large enough to fly a fleet through. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut as atmosphere rushed out into space. But the damage was done. The flagship's perfect systems were failing, its weapons offline, its engines struggling to maintain orbit. Li Jiwan, bleeding from a dozen wounds but still alive, led her surviving crew through the breach into the enemy ship. They carried simple human weapons, bullets and explosives and determination, against an enemy armed with technology that could reshape matter itself. It should have been no contest. Instead, it became the strangest chase scene in galactic history, as Earth's defenders hunted an immortal emperor through the corridors of his own flagship. Emperor Valdris was no longer the perfect divine ruler he had appeared to be. His stolen organs were failing as his life support systems lost power. His perfect face showed cracks where cybernetic implants were breaking down. For the first time in 1,000 years, he looked like what he really was. A very old, very frightened parasite whose luck was finally running out. The final confrontation took place in the Emperor's throne room, a vast chamber filled with the stolen treasures of 1,000 conquered worlds. Valdris stood before his throne, still trying to project divine authority, even as his body betrayed the lie of his immortality. "You cannot kill a god," he said to Li Jiwan as she approached with her simple human weapon. "You're right," Li Jiwan replied, raising her rifle. "But you're not a god. You're just another bully who got too big for his boots." The fight was short and brutal. Emperor Valdris had weapons that could disintegrate matter and armor that could stop starship weapons. Li Jiwan had something else, a lifetime of learning that sometimes you have to fight impossible odds anyway. When it was over, the Emperor lay dying on the floor of his throne room, his perfect illusion finally shattered. His last words were strangely prophetic. "You don't understand what you've done. The galaxy needs order. Without the Dominion, chaos will consume everything." "Maybe," Li Jiwan said, looking down at the creature that had terrorized half the galaxy. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Today we just had to stop you." The news of Emperor Valdris's death spread through the Grand Fleet like wildfire. Ships that had been fighting each other moments before suddenly found themselves allies again, united by the realization that they had all been slaves to a monster. Admiral Luxus, now commanding the largest fleet in galactic history, sent a message to Earth. The Dominion is no more. We place ourselves under the protection of the Deathworld Alliance. 5 years later, the galaxy was a very different place. The former Dominion worlds were learning to govern themselves, guided by species who understood that true strength came not from conquering others, but from surviving the impossible together. Earth, Corax Prime, and Venom's Edge remained what they had always been, the three most dangerous worlds in known space. But now, instead of being feared for their hostility, they were respected as the birthplaces of the warriors who had broken the chains of tyranny. Admiral Kim Day, now commanding the combined fleets of 100 liberated worlds, stood on his bridge looking out at the stars. Beside him stood General Thekfor of Corax Prime and Commander Zixela of Venom's Edge, his partners in the strangest alliance the galaxy had ever known. "What do you think?" Kim Day asked. "Was the Emperor right? Will chaos consume everything, without the Dominion to maintain order?" General Thekfor's crystal body flickered with what might have been amusement. "Perhaps, but chaos is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes the old order needs to be broken before something better can grow." Commander Zixala made the bubbling sound that passed for laughter among her people. "Besides, if chaos comes, we'll deal with it the way we deal with everything else." "How's that?" Kim Day asked. "We'll survive it," she said simply. "It's what Deathworlders do." In the depths of space, where new threats were always emerging, and old empires sometimes tried to rise again, the Deathworld Alliance maintained its watch. They had learned something important during their war against the Dominion, something that would guide them for generations to come. The secret to victory wasn't being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. It was something much simpler and much more powerful.